Imagine this, Earth is 4.5 billion years old today. The oldest humans began to exist 7 million years ago. Modern humans appeared 300,000 years ago. Now calculate, who inhabited planet Earth before there were humans? Was it empty? Perhaps we would have agreed on that if the Silurian hypothesis hadn't entered the picture. In 2018, two scientists came together to make the world question everything they knew about Earth's history. With an astonishing proposal, they fearlessly posed the great question: was there an ancient civilization before us? What if Earth hosted not just one but many advanced cultures? And if there were more, what if all traces were erased? For centuries, we thought we were unique, the pinnacle of evolution. This belief seems sound. Yet the Silurian hypothesis suggests otherwise. This idea was first proposed in 2018 by scientists Adam Frank and Gavin A. Schmidt and published in an article titled "The Silurian Hypothesis." Would it be possible to detect an industrial civilization in the geological record? The study suggests that not only did an advanced species exist before us, but geological processes must have also erased all evidence of their existence. What began as mere imagination of a civilization before us quickly transformed into disturbing questions about their remains. Think about it. Imagine all of humanity disappeared today. How long would it take for all evidence of our existence to vanish? Scientists estimate several thousand years. Our impressive skyscrapers would collapse. Plastics would decompose. Even our radioactive waste would fade. If all traces of our seemingly magnificent presence could disappear in a few thousand years, what do you believe happened to the civilizations before us? Could we humans be only the last chapter of a much older story? But before we answer this question, where does the name Silurian come from? We begin with the Silurian period. Scientists assume that about 443 to 419 million years ago, in the third and shortest period of the Paleozoic, there was life in Earth's oceans. However, there was no evidence whatsoever of intelligent life. Furthermore, astrophysicist Adam Frank and climate scientist Gavin Schmidt thought it would be nice to mention Doctor Who, a remnant of a past era on planet Earth. Remember the science fiction series where the fictional Silurians were an advanced reptilian species that lived before humans? Yes, that's them. By combining the idea of whether an ancient civilization lived before humans with the theory that there was life in the distant Silurian period, the Silurian hypothesis began to make sense. But Frank and Schmidt's work didn't stop there. Their thought experiment examined whether such ancient civilizations left recognizable traces of their existence. Their conclusion, probably not. Why, you ask? Because geological processes like plate tectonics, erosion, and fossilization are so powerful that they could erase all physical evidence of an ancient society. Frank and Schmidt argued that instead of looking for a smoking Silurian picture or other absurd physical evidence, we should better search for chemical fingerprints in Earth's crust. And for a generation of people with trust issues, that can be difficult. Imagine giving up your search for real lizard people to focus on anomalies in the carbon cycle. But soon you'll understand why these scientists thought this was the best approach. Did you know that planet Earth is constantly restless? Like a series of hormonal mood swings, Earth has a dynamic nature that amazes both archaeologists and geologists. Here's why. Today's oceans can become tomorrow's mountains. And the mountains you see today could later become habitable residential areas for humans. Earth constantly reshapes its surface and alters its geological history through geological processes: erosion, tectonics, volcanism, fossilization, and much more. Take plate tectonics, for example. Earth's crust consists of plates that slowly move, collide, and sink into what are called subduction zones. Deep beneath the surface, where you're standing right now, our planet experiences a transformation. But it happens so slowly that you feel nothing. Over millions of years, however, the effects of this process are seen. Gradually, Earth's crust is recycled, destroying all evidence of ancient structures or cities that may once have existed. That's right. The same slow process is currently ongoing, and will erase evidence of our existence in millions of years. Don't believe it? Then how is it that Earth's oldest oceanic crust is about 200 million years old? Think about it. Even on land, we observe how the forces of erosion gradually wear down mountains and bury valleys. Before our eyes, natural forces like water and wind work to reshape Earth's surface year after year. And when it's neither plate tectonics nor erosion, fossilization takes the lead. Under nature's relentless pressure, even concrete and metal decompose. So what remains in the rocks available to us today? Only a fraction of Earth's history is preserved in them. Since such geological processes constantly repeat, the probability is high that entire epochs were erased. If there had indeed been an advanced culture millions of years ago, their machines, roads, and skyscrapers would have been ground to dust and distributed across the planet. But if all evidence of an ancient industrial society was destroyed, on what are Frank and Schmidt's thought experiments based? Since we agree that geological processes must have destroyed the physical evidence of their existence, the scientists relied on non-physical evidence that cannot be erased, non-physical explanations. When the desirable is not available, the available becomes desirable. Frank and Schmidt oriented themselves to this theory when designing their article. If direct evidence like artifacts or structures used by the Silurians were destroyed by natural processes, what about chemical fingerprints? Surely chemical signatures embedded in Earth's crust could serve as subtle indicators of past industrial activities, right? Take abnormal isotope ratios, for example. If an industrialized civilization inhabited Earth before us, it must have operated industrial processes like burning fossil fuels. And if so, this would have altered the natural content of carbon isotopes. Carbon-12 would be significantly higher than carbon-13. And where else but in the sedimented layers of Earth's crust would such anomalies be found? And if the ancient civilizations actually used nitrogen-based fertilizers for their agriculture, assuming they practiced agriculture, there would also be anomalies in the nitrogen-15 content. These abnormal values in Earth's crust could point to the possibility of synthetic fertilizer production long before the emergence of humans. But this isn't the only possibility the curious scientists propose. Frank and Schmidt pushed the Silurian hypothesis even further by asking themselves, what if the ancient society also waged nuclear wars? Wait a minute. That's crossing a line for a civilization whose existence we're not initially certain of. But let's imagine this advanced society actually developed nuclear weapons. If so, then radiological evidence could also be dormant beneath Earth's surface. Why, the answer lies in radioactive isotopes. If the Silurians actually used nuclear reactions for energy generation or weapons production, there would be traces of radioactive isotopes. Plutonium-244 and iodine-129, for example, have extremely long half-lives and rarely occur in nature. If scientists could prove their presence in geological layers, voila, we would have evidence of earlier use of nuclear technology. However, if scientists still lack such evidence, Frank and Schmidt had one more up their sleeve. What if the industrial civilization burned so much fossil fuel that it released excessive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? This would result in global warming. Hard to believe, right? However, the scientists pursued all the most absurd approaches to find traces of an advanced society that existed millions of years before humans. While these proposed tests suggest the possibility of earlier industrial activities, there's a catch. Natural processes can also provide similar evidence. Volcanic eruptions, for example, can hurl enormous amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This could also distort carbon isotope ratios. A good example of this is the Permian-Triassic mass extinction over 250 million years ago. Within the blink of an eye, a massive volcanic eruption led to global warming and ocean acidification. So before you blame the Silurians for ancient global warming, think about the natural events that also occurred during this period. In this situation, we know how exciting the idea of a past civilization waging nuclear wars sounded. Imagine lizard people, all vigilant in their reptilian armor, ready to shoot down a hostile lizard land. It's the perfect reincarnation of Doctor Who. But as interesting as that sounds, it doesn't have to be the case. Almost 2 billion years ago, in the Oklo region of Gabon, West Africa, there were also natural nuclear reactors. Although it's the first and so far last of its kind, astrophysicists and scientists have used it to refute the Silurian hypothesis. Even if radiological traces from earlier industrial societies were found today, one could assume that these are due to natural nuclear processes like the one in Oklo. After all possible tests that could prove the existence of an ancient civilization were refuted, the followers of the Silurian hypothesis pulled their last trump card out of the hat, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. This event occurred about 56 million years ago. To this day, it's considered one of the most extreme global warming events in Earth's history. and for good reason. For millennia, global temperatures rose by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius, reaching 20 degrees Celsius at the North Pole. The warming lasted over 200,000 years, releasing enormous amounts of carbon into the atmosphere and causing profound environmental changes. This raised the big question. Since the oldest humans only began to exist about 7 million years ago, the question arises, who or what released so much carbon into the atmosphere that the PETM emerged? Could it be the same advanced civilization proposed in the Silurian hypothesis? This was Frankenschmidt's last card. Think about it. In the modern anthroposophical era, industrial human activity has led to a sharp increase in carbon dioxide emissions. This led to uninterrupted government warnings of a possible global warming event. If humans can release as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as 56 million years ago, what's the guarantee that the PETM emissions weren't caused by another industrial civilization like ours? What if the Silurians led just as fulfilled a life as we do? Did they really cause the PETM? Or is this event not sufficient evidence for an advanced society before us? You guessed right, it's not. Following Frankenschmidt's work, other scientists have discredited the theory of ancient civilizations as the cause of the PETM. The first valid reason is that natural processes also match the evidence. The carbon release could be traced back to volcanic activity, the destabilization of methane hydrate, or even the release of organic carbon. Second, there's no archaeological or fossil evidence. Although we've established that geological processes might have destroyed the last artifacts or fossils of the Silurians, nothing has been found in Earth's crust that points to the PETM period. Finally, the carbon release during the PETM was significantly slower than the carbon emissions caused by human activities. If the ancient times had been as advanced as the theory claims, the carbon emission rate would be similar. Instead, the carbon release rate during the PETM resembles that of a natural, gradual process. With these counter-arguments, the Founding Fathers' last trump card of the Silurian hypothesis had fallen. However, if the PETM event isn't sufficient evidence for an advanced society existing before humans, there are other indicators. The dinosaurs come into play. For years, the scientific community assumed that dinosaurs were nothing more than wild, lumbering creatures with low intelligence. But what if this species is far more intelligent and industrialized than we credit them? Initially, focus was on the Stegosaurus. Although they had a gigantic physique, their brain was so small that the entire species was written off as unintelligent. But that changed with current studies. In 2021, a man dared to look beyond the general assessment of dinosaurs. Paleontologist Diego Pol researched the Maiasaura species, and the results were astonishing. These species showed surprising intelligence and surprising social behavior. For example, the Maiasaura species returned to the same nesting sites year after year. This not only proved that they had memory, but also the ability to assess environmental conditions for their offspring. But that's not all. Paul's research also showed that Maiasaura communities worked hand in hand to improve their living conditions. While males protected nesting females and eggs, younger dinosaurs searched for food. Undoubtedly, this level of social organization reflects the behavior of today's animals. They were advanced in their own way. However, anyone who believes the Maiasaura species came closest to the ancient civilization that the Silurian hypothesis hints at is mistaken. Among all dinosaurs, Troodon stands out as the strongest candidate for higher intelligence. First of all, this small bird-like dinosaur had a higher brain-to-body ratio than most of its contemporaries. Paleontologists also concluded that its binocular vision and grasping hands might indicate that the species was familiar with complex tasks like cooperative hunting. As the cherry on top, researchers speculate that if the asteroid impact 66 million years ago hadn't wiped out the dinosaurs, the Troodon species might have evolved into more intelligent forms, perhaps even more intelligent than humans. To this end, paleontologist Dale Russell promptly invented the dinosauroid, a theoretical evolution of Troodon, into a humanoid being capable of building machines and changing culture dinosaur for dinosaur. How bizarre is that? Very bizarre. Although it was a speculative idea, Russell's theory raises an interesting possibility. Could other, still undiscovered dinosaur species have reached a higher level of organization than Troodon? If dinosaurs like Troodon showed higher intelligence, could they alone have laid the foundation for a civilization? Here again, the lack of direct evidence in the form of tools, buildings, or artifacts doesn't help us. However, the Silurian hypothesis doesn't fail to develop this idea further. If an advanced dinosaur civilization actually existed, their remains could be crying for help as faint isotope signatures in the geological records. It may surprise you, but what if this ancient civilization is an entity we've overlooked over the years? Over 2 decades ago, a Japanese biologist named Toshuki Nakagaki conducted an experiment that left scientists speechless. The biologist placed a slime mold and a sugar cube in a maze. Initially, both entities were at the farthest ends of the maze. Within hours, the mold's threads grew through the maze, searching and changing their route until it reached the sugar. With this experiment, fungi could match the intelligence of some animals even though they have no brain. This raises the question, could fungi have been the basis for a prehistoric intelligent system? If so, their civilization might have thrived in silence, leaving no traces. The list could go on. If we dare to research even deeper, we may find that even the pyramids and their excellent constructions are more of a question than an answer. Although it's agreed that they were built by the Egyptians, paleontologists disagree. Take a look at the Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt. Now look at the Pyramid of Chichen Itza, and finally the Pyramid of Cholula in Mexico. What do you notice? All 3 pyramids were built thousands of years apart, and it's assumed they were built by the ancient inhabitants of each of the 2 cities. However, the recurring style and patterns of these structures separated by oceans give rise to the assumption that they were built by an advanced civilization even before there were humans. We're just as curious. Once again, the Silurian hypothesis makes us ask, was there an ancient industrial civilization before us? In what form did they come? As the pet, Truden dinosaurs, the overlooked fungi, or the true architects of the pyramids? And more importantly, did these societies all get lost through geological processes? Or if we got a little closer, would their chemical fingerprints tell us? What do you think? In the 19th century, heated rumors circulated about a strange idea. This idea questioned everything historians believed about human civilization, because this time it wasn't about Atlantis or ancient Egypt, and not about Mesopotamia either. It was about a continent that preceded these civilizations, a lost world called Mu. And it all started with a man named Augustus Le Plongeon, a 19th century archaeologist who devoted his career to exploring Maya ruins. He was known for his thesis that the Yucatan civilization was older than Egypt, but no one expected this archaeologist to dig even deeper. Out of the blue, Le Plongeon claimed that a continent named Mu once existed, and ancient Egypt descended from it. He insisted that the strange language in his studies of Maya texts spoke of a great civilization that preceded all known history. To make matters worse, according to Le Plongeon, this great civilization was swallowed by the sea. Le Plongeon believed the Maya civilization didn't arise on its own, but descended from refugees from Mu, who fled after their homeland sank. However, his ideology was too radical to pursue. He couldn't say where this civilization once existed or what might have happened to it, and if it existed, where was the evidence of its existence? Because Le Plongeon lacked solid evidence for his belief, the rumors about Mu were soon swept under the carpet until they aroused one man's curiosity: James Churchward. Suddenly, the discarded idea resurfaced. Why didn't Churchward simply believe that Mu existed? He had evidence. In 1926, a British author published The Holy Grail of Ancient Civilizations. His name was James Churchward, and his 3-part book series bore the titles The Lost Continent of Mu, The Children of Mu, and The Sacred Symbols of Mu. In these books, Churchward told a story that captivated everyone who heard it. With his statement, doubts about Mu's existence were removed page by page. According to Churchward, he was a soldier in India 50 years before the publication of his book. During his service, he befriended a high-ranking from his priest friend in India. This led many to question whether Niven's tablets were also written by descendants of the Mu civilization. Churchward confirmed that the text resembled the Naga Maya language. But the ancient stones weren't the only evidence Churchward had. When it comes to evidence of Mu's existence, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Did you know that there are questionable structures under the Pacific Ocean? Imagine you take a trip to the Pacific Islands and witness structures that are too defined to be attributed to nature. This was Churchward's next piece of evidence. The area allegedly inhabited by the Mu civilization had monuments that testified to their existence. That also made sense. If Mu was real and as advanced as Churchward believed, then its people would have left traces of their knowledge. And they did leave traces clear enough to make us question everything we believed about the true creation of humanity. The first outstanding evidence for the mother civilization are the Moai statues of Easter Island. The Moai are gigantic stone statues of human figures erected by the Rapa Nui people of Easter Island. But these are no ordinary statues. One look at them is enough to recognize that their builders worked with meticulous precision and high-quality materials. Built between 1250 and 1500 AD, the Moai have an absurd shape. Oversized heads 3 times as large as the entire statue, and they have no legs. The largest Moai is called Paro, and is about 10 meters high and weighs about 82 tons. Can you believe that? When the Rapa Nui were asked about the inspiration for building such monuments, they revealed that the Moai were created in honor of their ancestors. But that was so long ago. So who were their ancestors and where did they come from? This leads us directly back to Mu. Since the geographic location of Easter Island also corresponds to the location defined by Churchward, all hands are full with a big question. What if the Rapa Nui were descendants of the lost continent named Mu? Think about it. How else could a civilization from that time have thought of erecting such massive statues without being instructed in it by an older civilization? We must not forget the main material used to erect these magnificent statues: volcanic rock. This is a relatively soft, workable rock formed from compressed volcanic ash. This rock is said to come from an extinct volcanic crater on the island called Rano Raraku, and it was at this location that the statues were erected. However, historians expressed a new concern. As conscientiously as the Rapa Nui erected this timeless monument with the available means, it was humanly impossible to move the Moai to where their remains rest today. How did the Rapa Nui manage this? The narrative of the natives would shock you. They said the statues walked to their location on foot. When the oldest natives of Easter Island were asked about the Moai's mode of transport, they answered, according to oral tradition, the Moai actually walked. By now, however, we all know that this explanation isn't plausible. Researchers Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo suspect that the statues were moved upright using ropes in a rocking motion. This comes closest to the accounts of the islanders. Some scientists disagree and suggest a different transport method. What if the Rapa Nui used a system of tree logs to roll the statues to their destination? Although this method would have required a lot of wood, it was at least logical. The last suspected mode of transport for these statues is least believed, but seems to be Churchward's greatest concern: spiritual power. Some beliefs say that the Moai possess spiritual powers that enable the statues to move independently to their respective destinations. Churchward supported this assumption by establishing from his findings on the tablets that the mother civilization, although he believed humanity descended from Mu, was no ordinary civilization. But if they weren't ordinary people like us, who were they? Before we analyze this hot topic, you need more evidence that will earn you a few extra points for the Mu civilization. Apart from the legendary Moai of Easter Island, the pyramid phenomenon is a mystery that could contain clues to the mother civilization. How do you explain that such massive structures were erected in different parts of the world, according to similar patterns? Many claim the pyramids were built by the Egyptians, but is that true? How is it that pyramids erected thousands of years apart by different civilizations all follow the same principles? Take a look at the Pyramid of Khufu at Giza. Located in Egypt, the structure is so carefully built that scientists claim it's aligned with extreme mathematical precision. Now consider the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico. They exhibit similar designs, although they were built thousands of years later. But that's far from surprising. Do you know the Shanxi pyramids in China? They're older than the Egyptian pyramids, yet they follow a similar geometric construction plan. This raises the question of whether they were actually built by different civilizations without connection to each other. If so, how could distant civilizations erect the same structures according to the same principles if they were completely isolated? What if the mother civilization Mu was the point that connected them all? Several theories support this thesis. One states that the builders of the Mu continent carried this knowledge with them as they spread across the world. On their travels, they preserved the secrets of their lost civilization in stone tablets, like those discovered by James Churchward. What if Churchward wasn't the only one who found these tablets? Although he made his discoveries publicly known, others may not have. A more interesting theory states that these pyramids weren't just tombs or temples, but energy centers erected with high technology incomprehensible to us. Could the pyramids be the last remnant of the lost continent Mu? If that's true, what high technology did this ancient civilization use that couldn't be understood? Were the Mu people even human? Get ready. You're about to hear some of the most bizarre stories about the Mu continent. You'll question your genes and wonder if you're truly 100% human after all. Let's go back to the question of who the Mu people were. As Augustus Le Plongeon and James Churchward popularized, the continent Mu was considered the first great civilization. That means all human knowledge, all technology, and even spirituality came from here. This would explain the magnificent structures on Easter Island and even the pyramids. But the deeper we dig, the more questions arise. How could an ancient civilization that existed even before Egypt achieve such incredible advances? How did they develop complex languages, master astronomy, and erect structures that modern technology still finds difficult to explain? No wonder wild theories circulated. What if Mu's people weren't humans? Here's where the ancient astronaut hypothesis comes into play. This theory states that extraterrestrials visited Earth thousands of years ago and interacted with early humans, thus influencing their development. Breaking news. This theory isn't mere speculation. Evidence for it has been found in ancient texts around the world. Take, for example, the Sumerians' narratives about the Anunnaki, celestial beings who descended from the sky to create and guide humanity. Or the Popol Vuh of the Maya, which tells of sky gods who created humans from nothing. Or let's talk about the Hindu Vedas and their Vimana spacecraft controlled by gods. Stories about contacts with extraterrestrial life abound. Some researchers argue that these weren't myths but visitors from outside our planet. If this theory is correct, could Mu have been their first point of contact? The testimonies of the tablets repeatedly confirm one thing. The people of Mu were incredibly advanced. They're said to have had divine rulers, wise beings with deeper knowledge than a primitive civilization. Now it seems Mu wasn't just home to humans, but to something more. Perhaps a hybrid civilization. But if this is true on any level, a frightening probability awaits every person willing to pursue this thought. Some theories state that if extraterrestrials actually visited Mu, they pursued a goal to influence humanity. After all, ancient texts repeatedly point out that divine beings were the source of humanity or altered humanity. This could have happened through the mating of extraterrestrials with the first civilizations. In our time, scientists could describe such things as absolute abomination due to their controversy. What if this coexistence was already an outrageous controversy back then, so much so that the entire continent had to be wiped out in a single night? Here the real chaos began. It didn't start with the fascinating origin of the Mu civilization, or James Churchward, the first audible founder of the ancient tablets. Historians also didn't clash when the Moai statues and the Great Pyramids were connected to Mu, or even more shockingly, when theories emerged about a possible connection between humans and extraterrestrials thousands of years ago. The last straw was the sudden disappearance of Mu and its inhabitants. All other theories and claims were tolerated since historians couldn't find solid evidence to refute James Churchward's claims. However, geological findings were the historian's core competency. If there were no intellectual evidence for such a civilization, surely Earth wouldn't lie, would it? Unfortunately, there's no geological evidence for a sunken continent in the Pacific, and scientists came to this conclusion. Geologists argue that continents don't simply sink, especially not ones with over 60 million inhabitants and a flourishing livelihood. Furthermore, the Pacific Ocean floor has been extensively mapped. There's no evidence of a massive loss of landmass beneath the waves. Even plate tectonics, the process of Earth's crust shifting, makes it impossible for a continent the size of Mu to have suddenly disappeared without a trace. Then there are the tablets discovered by James Churchward. The ancient records that, according to his statement, told the story of Mu are a problem. The problem is that no one except Churchward ever saw these tablets. He never made them available for secondary analysis. For this reason, no other researcher could confirm their existence. Without the tablets, the entire history of the Mu civilization is based on an unverified claim. But it doesn't end there. Linguists also questioned Churchward's conviction that Mu was the mother civilization that influenced Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Central America. They considered, what if the languages and architectural principles of these different civilizations developed independently? Since there's no solid linguistic or genetic evidence linking them to a common origin in the Pacific, this seems a safe assumption. But if Mu never existed, why do so many cultures have stories of a lost homeland swallowed by the sea? Is there a loose thread in this story? Perhaps there is. Although scientists and historians reject Churchward's claims that Mu was a lost continent on which human civilization was based, some researchers believe there might be a grain of truth behind the legend. One possibility: what if Mu wasn't a continent but a misinterpretation of real historical events? Take, for example, the theory of the Indonesian landmass. Researchers suspect that Mu could be the Sundaland region, a vast area in Southeast Asia that partially sank at the end of the last ice age. That was about 12,000 years ago, roughly the same time period Church described. Another misinterpretation scholars conclude are the writings with which everything began. Remember the Maya writings discovered by Augustus Le Plongeon? Yes, some researchers believe Le Plongeon simply misinterpreted Maya texts that referred to an ancient place called Mu. What if these texts didn't refer to a lost continent but to another symbolic land in the extinction of Mu? Churchward said the lost continent disappeared in a cataclysmic event, volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, he said. But what if this legend is a memory of true events? Catastrophic events like the sinking of Doggerland in Europe or the flooding of Sundaland. These alternative explanations suggest that Mu may not have been a lost continent, but a mixture of different real events and myths passed down from generation to generation. Once, scholars sat at the feet of high-minded philosophers and learned. Since the era of Socrates, the world began to understand the meaning of philosophy and its influence on life. When Plato, a student of Socrates, emerged, this respect was passed on. The words of this student were profound. Undoubtedly, Plato lived up to this task in his teachings. But one day, everything changed. He published 2 dialogues titled Timaeus and Critias. But what was special about these dialogues? Not just their interesting names, no. In the dialogues, Plato expressed his thoughts on the creation of the world. However, he didn't usually do this. He delved deep into creation as if reporting from a solid historical account. And between the lines, he mentioned an ancient civilization, Atlantis. What exactly did Plato say about Atlantis? According to his words, in ancient times the whole earth was divided by lot among the gods. But Poseidon received the island of Atlantis, fathered children with a mortal woman, and settled them in a part of the island which I will describe. When he finally described the land, the world of history plunged into chaos. And for the following reason, Plato described a civilization that was far too advanced for humans. In a flash, his words resembled the script of a science fiction film. See for yourself. Plato wrote, "The most famous of all was the sinking of the island of Atlantis. This great island lay. The Pillars of Heracles was larger than Libya and Asia combined, and formed the transition to other islands and a great ocean, whose harbor was the Mediterranean Sea. And within the Pillars, the realm of Atlantis reached in Europe to Tyrrhenia and in Libya to Egypt. But that wasn't enough. In further texts, Plato revealed that knowledge about Atlantis was passed to him 9,000 years ago by Egyptian ancestors. The Greek philosopher described Atlantis as so advanced that it could compete with human civilization, and that was simply too much for him. Soon there was a problem. Imagine you respect an authority so much that their words are gold, but at some point they say something you don't like. That's how scholars thought about the Atlantic civilization. Therefore, on one hand, Plato told of Atlantis' existence like a real historical account. He stated that knowledge was passed from ancient Egyptian priests to the Greek statesman Solon, who lived around 600 BC. On the other hand, it seemed like a narrative. Since Plato was such a philosopher, scholars argued his portrayal of Atlantis was only a metaphor and not a real place. But was this argument correct? Counter-arguing historians raised a valid question. If the Atlantis described by Timaeus and Critias was only an allegory, Why did Plato use real places like Asia, Europe, and Libya to emphasize its size and location? This great island lay opposite the Pillars of Heracles and was larger than Libya and Asia together. Moreover, this great Atlantis had a mystical end. Scholars began to argue that this civilization could be more than the fable many consider it. What if it actually existed and met a catastrophic end? We're not talking about the mythical kingdom from cartoons or science fiction. The true Atlantis was described by Plato as a utopian high-tech civilization that disappeared into the sea within a day and a night. According to conventional historiography, it never existed but was only an allegory. Yet according to Plato, we see something different when he writes about the civilization's downfall. But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis likewise disappeared into the depths of the sea. There was Atlantis, and then there wasn't. How can one sweep such a detailed account under the carpet as mere myth? The answer is no. Because deep in the sands of time, beneath ancient ruins and in the DNA of mysterious megaliths, clues emerge. Clues suggesting that Atlantis might have been real. Not only that, but also evidence that its inhabitants weren't primitive survivors, but something much more advanced. We're not just asking, did Atlantis exist? We're posing a bolder question. How would it feel to live there? Imagine you were one of them, an Atlantic citizen in the last days before the flood destroyed the city. What would it be like? According to Plato, there's a whole range of activities. You would walk beneath domed temples pulsing with crystal-powered energy, float through air transport systems far ahead of our current technology, eat food enhanced through frequency-based agriculture, heal diseases with sound and color, and more. You could study the cosmos through lenses much older than Galileo's. Sounds like science fiction, right? But it's not. These ideas come from ancient texts and archaeological discoveries that historians still try to explain or cover up today. But then something happened that interrupted this cutting-edge technology of Atlantis. Something so catastrophic that it didn't just destroy cities but erased an entire timeline. But before we talk about the end, let's take a journey into the forgotten world of Atlantis. It's morning and the sun reflects in your face. But wait. As you sit up and enjoy the view from your window, you notice the land looks different. The sun rises over concentric rings of land and sea. A turn to the left and you see towering white walls shimmering in the light and crystal domes humming with subtle energy. Welcome to Atlantis, a place of highly developed life. You step out of your house and the sight leaves you speechless. Your house looks like a structure of luminous stone. It's not just undoubtedly beautiful, it also regulates the temperature itself and channels ambient frequency. How crazy is that? Look at the streets. There are no traffic jams like rush hour in New York City. No hectic car horns or ringing phones. All you see are magnetic transport capsules gliding silently on invisible rails. One thing strikes you, time flows here in rhythm, not in chaos. The city itself is alive and peaceful at the same time. Look at the architecture and you'll discover something. The citizens of Atlantis have style. The Atlanteans designed their cities according to sacred geometry. Streets aligned with constellations and buildings vibrating at healing frequencies. In this land, everything is both functional and spiritual. In Atlantis, science and soul are one. When you move to a new city or travel over the holidays, your home is your priority, right? But once you admire your surroundings, there's a long list of experiences you want to have. It's the same with our little excursion. Our next stop is an even more fascinating place. You make your way to the Energy Hall. As the name suggests, this is the place from which all the city's energy is transmitted. With such a detailed description by Plato, it's not surprising that the walls glow purple. Here, massive quartz crystals channel Earth's electromagnetic currents and supply the entire city with high precision. But these crystals don't just power lamps. They also recalibrate your consciousness. Sounds crazy, wait. Modern science confirms that quartz has high electrical properties. But this didn't just start today. Ancient texts point to similar crystal networks in Egypt, Tibet, and even Central America. Moreover, Atlantic healers don't use these stones as instruments. One step into their healing chamber and harmonic sounds flood your senses. Unlike in our world today, there are no pills or conventional medical rinses. How healthy would that be? If you think their medicine is excellent, pause for a moment and think about what their education system must have looked like. Here's what we know. Education isn't about testing memory performance. It's about awakening potentials. Given Atlantis's level of development, wouldn't school children have learned telepathy, sacred geometry, astronomy, and dream journeying? Would you consider that far-fetched for an island where advanced schools are simultaneously temples and spiritual alignment is placed above written facts? Isn't this a characteristic that our current education system urgently needs? Yes, but even the beautiful curriculum isn't the only thing we could adopt from Atlantic civilization. As Plato wrote, on this island of Atlantis there was a confederation of kings of great and wonderful power, which ruled over the whole island and over many other islands and parts of the continent. How powerful was this civilization that it could rule over other parts of the continent? That can be seen from their high-end technology. In the heart of Atlantis, energy wasn't just used but harmonized. In the city's center, massive crystalline towers rose like guardians. The goal of beauty and balance. These structures formed a vast energy network that tapped into Earth's natural magnetic field. To illustrate this, think of Tesla towers only many millennia earlier. But that's not all. The Atlanteans believed crystals contained consciousness. Properly aligned, they became channels for anti-gravity travel, manipulation of matter, and even time distortion. With this development, it's clear that the characteristics labeled as false might simply be suppressed history. Even today, fragments of quartz-based technology and magnetic stone arrangements at places like Pumapunku and Baalbek puzzle engineers. What if these are remnants of Atlantic exports? But for a moment on your journey, the focus shifts from everything you see to what you hear, and then you realize that sound in Atlantis didn't just serve music. It was the language of matter. Atlantic scientists didn't build with hammers and chisels. They built with frequencies. There's only one way they could have achieved this. By directing harmonic sound waves at materials, they altered density, reshaped stone, and even levitated structures. Some reports even describe tuning forks that could lift objects. Others report voice-controlled doors and sound operations that heal tissue without surgical blades. Strange, right? This raises the big question. What if the Great Pyramids, the stone spheres of Costa Rica, and the H-blocks of Tiwanaku were built with the same lost sound technology? In the 20th century, Nikola Tesla thrilled everyone with the Wardenclyffe Tower. What they didn't know, Atlantis was already centuries ahead, supplying entire cities with energy without wires. Using piezoelectric crystals, magnetic fields, and atmospheric resonance, the Atlanteans transmitted energy invisibly. Light shone without bulbs. Water flowed uphill. Vehicles glided silently. And the special thing, they achieved this without polluting a single atom of air. This is the pinnacle that environmentalists today keep trying to reach. In fact, however, an advanced civilization already achieved this millennia ago. And if you happen to fall ill during your visit to Atlantis, brace yourself. They have some healing methods in store. In Atlantis, medicine wasn't just about curing diseases, it was about restoring harmony. The Atlanteans believed that illness arises as a disturbance of the body's frequency. So instead of pills or cuts, healers used vibrations. Light, sound, and color weren't mere aesthetics like in today's world. Back then, they were medicine. Patients lay beneath prism-shaped domes where beams of colored light pulsed at specific frequencies to realign chakras and human tissue and calm the nervous system. Today, fringe sciences like chromotherapy and bioresonance reflect these ideas. But in Atlantis, they were common practice. Can you believe that? In Atlantis, you don't enter a hospital. You enter a temple. The walls are adorned with sacred geometry. Incense wafts through the crystal-clear air. And the silence over there isn't uncomfortable. It's medicinal. Even the diagnostic method was different. Aura readers and telepathic scans replaced MRIs. Diseases weren't viewed as invasions but as spiritual imbalances demanding attention. No wonder modern archaeologists find ancient temple ruins with surgical precision carved into stone tables and strange metallic instruments nearby. They wonder if these were early hospitals. But as unique as the auditory system in Atlantis was, nothing prepares you for their aging techniques. In Atlantis, aging wasn't feared. It was optional. Some citizens regularly entered rejuvenation chambers. These are crystalline capsules that emit low-frequency waves to repair DNA, regenerate tissue, and even awaken ancestral memory. The thought alone is inconceivable. Want to know what they say? It was said these chambers could extend life by centuries. The Atlanteans believed DNA carries the echoes of past lives. Healing the body also released forgotten knowledge. Modern science calls this epigenetics. Atlantis called it remembering. But here's the question. If this technology existed, what happened to it? We'll never know the answer. But as you walk through Atlantis' streets and begin a conversation with some Atlanteans, you notice something. In Atlantis, leadership wasn't inherited. You had to earn it. Kings and queens weren't just figureheads of royal blood, but initiates who passed tests of mental discipline and spiritual maturity. The monarchy was oriented toward merit, and the throne was shared with councils of sages, healers, and scientists. Moreover, they were most likely selected based on intellect, intuition, and integrity. Behind the rulers lies something too unreal to speak of, a priesthood like no other. Let's talk briefly about the Atlantic priests. These priests were energy masters trained from childhood in astral projection, alchemy, and universal law. Their temples pulsed incessantly with spiritual knowledge, and their government was far from what we know today. Back then, rule was characterized by duality. Each council balanced masculine logic with feminine wisdom. Children were taught not just facts, but strict concentration. In this world, psychic abilities weren't supernatural. They were the standard. Isn't that the best type of government? You've fed your eyes with Atlantis' wonders by now. Next, you need to get used to an Atlantean's routine. What does daily life in Atlantis look like? You're not awakened by a shrill alarm clock, but by light gently filtered through translucent crystal walls. Like most houses in Atlantis, yours is made of a shimmering alloy called orichalcum. This legendary metal is said to shine like fire and conduct energy like no other. Over there, windows aren't just for sunlight. They're made of crystal glass that amplifies positive frequencies and protects against energetic pollution. The thought alone awakens in you the desire to reshape the world, right? And when it comes to transportation, asphalt and motors become superfluous. In Atlantis, travel is seamless, silent, and almost magical. Yes, floating capsules glide on invisible rails guided more by resonance than roads. Most likely, these spacecraft are powered by crystal-based energy systems adapted to Earth's natural magnetic field. Did you ever have to cross the ocean? Just enter an underwater tunnel and you'd be at your destination in no time. This was the state of cutting-edge technology that Plato tried to portray in his dialogues. And when you talk about the separation of work, play, and the divine, you're wrong. Daily life in Atlantis wasn't divided between career and self-care. Instead, your occupation reflected your soul's frequency. Artists, healers, architects, and scientists were all equal. Work wasn't seen as toil, but as a sacred contribution to the community. Play meant intense learning. Music, dance, and meditation were central rituals, not side hobbies. Spiritual practice, on the other hand, wasn't optional. It was embedded in daily life. Imagine crystal calibration in the morning, and then communal resonance baths at dusk. Every action was a conscious ritual, even eating. This wasn't utopia. It was planned. Thinking about it, could it be that the lost key to human potential was hidden in our way of life? Did you know that Atlantic seafarers traveled the world long before Magellan's departure or Columbus's arrival in America? And here's how they did it. They didn't use paper maps or compasses. Instead, they read the stars like a language. As Plato reported, Atlantic ships were built with magnetic propulsion to harness Earth's energy grid. Today, some scientists point to the Peary Race Map, a 16th century puzzle that depicts Antarctica as ice-free, as a remnant of Atlantic knowledge. That leads us to the question: who mapped a continent buried under kilometers of ice centuries before our discovery? Was this global awareness just a legend, or did Atlantis really reach all corners of the Earth? And when we talk about the artifacts around the world, the tension in the room rises. How do African statues get to ancient Olmec sites in Mexico? Why do pre-Columbian ruins in Peru resemble temple designs from Egypt? Established archaeology considers it coincidence, but Atlantic theorists disagree. They say it happened through contact. But wait a minute. Contact with what? Let's look at this more closely. Jewelry, carvings, and pyramid-shaped construction plans stretch like breadcrumb trails across continents. In Bolivia's Puma Punku, precisely cut stones fit together like three-dimensional puzzle pieces so well that some claim the techniques match those in Giza. Over in Japan's Yonaguni, Monument lies an underwater city that suspiciously corresponds to the Atlantic description. Were these cultural overlaps merely spontaneous genius, or are they evidence of a lost trade network led by a single world empire? According to Plato, Egyptian priests claimed Atlantis sank 9,000 years before Solon's time. But what if this wasn't the end, but only the beginning of a diaspora? Legends say some Atlanteans fled before the catastrophe and founded civilizations elsewhere. Thoth from Egypt, Quetzalcoatl in Central America, and Viracocha in Peru. Bearded, fair-skinned gods who taught writing, astronomy, and ethics. Could that be pure coincidence? Even the Dogon in Mali speak of sky visitors with cosmic knowledge. that resembles the Atlantic myth in an uncanny way. This led to the theory that Atlantis perhaps didn't disappear after its downfall as Plato claimed. What if it simply spread? And if there's something remarkable about the Atlanteans, it's that they didn't fear death. They viewed it as a transition on an eternal journey. Reincarnation wasn't a theory. It was known. Memories of past lives were sometimes accessible, especially for priests and sages who mastered the science of the soul. They also believed in karmic cycles. These actions will reverberate through lives until harmony is restored. Back then, prophets warned of an impending imbalance where greed would overwhelm wisdom and the island's downfall would become inevitable. But how is that even possible? We're talking about an advanced civilization that had figured everything out. What could go wrong? But as great as Atlantis was, there came a time when its inhabitants began to forget its purpose. Although the Atlanteans were advanced in thinking, there's hardly any progress that can stop a greedy soul. In Plato's story, humans' immense greed and moral decay were too much for the gods. Their wrath came upon the land in the form of a massive earthquake, and in a single night Atlantis disappeared. But something's not right with this story. If it was indeed the earthquake that wiped out the Atlantic civilization, why did this catastrophe occur at roughly the same time as the Great Flood? At first, the Great Flood was just a Bible story, something read to believers from an ancient book. It said there was a righteous man, a giant boat, and an entire planet swallowed by water. The Almighty sent this flood to wash all evil from Earth's surface. It was too much and there had to be an end. But what if there's more to this story? The Great Flood wasn't just a warning to the righteous. It was a record written down by different cultures. But there's an even more frightening thought. The Great Flood didn't just wipe out all evil from Mother Earth. It wiped out an entire ancient civilization. Moreover, this civilization might have possessed more knowledge, technology, and cities that surpassed the progress of our current world. And as the cherry on top, they left footprints that not even the floods could wash away. Get ready as we uncover the evidence of the forgotten world that existed before the rain. But before we dissect the traces of an intelligent civilization before the flood, let's talk about the flood itself. Do you believe it really happened? You know the stories from the Bible. A man named Noah was chosen to preach to the sinners of that time about the impending catastrophe. His message was simple: repent and come to the ark before the flood comes. But the crowd didn't listen to a word he said. And then it came. The floods poured from the sky for days. It poured continuously. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain pelted down on all who refused to enter the ark with Noah and his family. And after the rain, the waters remained on earth for 150 days before disappearing entirely. Then the new world began, with Noah, his family, and all living creatures in the ark. But unfortunately, historians encountered a problem right here. A big problem. For them, the flood story made no sense. Again and again, questions arose about Noah's warning of the impending catastrophe. How could he travel around the whole world to warn people about the flood? And how could it be that not a single person stirred? That made no sense. This brought researchers to an eerie conclusion. What if the flood never happened? Crazy, right? But before you grasp this thought, you should know something. The Great Flood isn't limited to a biblical narrative. And this is where it gets strange. You'd expect there to be flood myths in one or two ancient cultures. That could make sense. After all, rivers overflow and storms visit us from time to time. But the tide turns when a story that sounds like a folk tale is spread across too many cultures. It starts to become substantial. The same applies to the flood story. Since over 200 cultures around the world tell nearly identical flood stories, it's no longer a coincidence. It becomes a pattern. Take the Mesopotamians, for example. There was Utnapishtim, who was warned by the gods of an impending flood. He then built a giant boat that transported his family, craftsmen, and the seed of all life. Or do we mean the Hindus? They had Manu, who was saved by a fish god and brought aboard a ship to repopulate Earth. The list is endless. The Maya, the Greeks, the Norsemen, the Chinese, and even the Australians, you name it. They all have the story of a flood that came to cleanse the world after an age of corruption and forgotten power. The same plot, different names, and different timelines. When a myth is rooted in so many cultures, then truth lies within it. Think about how specific the details are in the different versions. First, there's a warning from a god or celestial being. Second, there's a chosen survivor or chosen family. Third, you see the construction of a large ship or ark. Fourth, animals and knowledge are preserved and saved for the sake of continuity. And finally, afterward, there's a new beginning. a changed world compared to the one that existed before the flood. Even in cultures without contact or shared language, the same elements appeared again and again. That's why researchers James Fraser and Mircea Eliade argued that flood myths were more than just myths. There must be more behind the folklore. It's proven that the flood wasn't a hoax. So what if they weren't all invented? That would mean one thing. The flood stories are eyewitness accounts passed down over millennia. And although many believe the Noahic version where a new world emerged only from Noah and his descendants, it doesn't meet all the criteria. Here's where the considerations come in. What if there was an ancient civilization wiped out by the flood? And what if some survived to pass on the story of their earlier existence? Realistically speaking, what if they left geological evidence too clear to ignore? The flood myth isn't a myth. Rather, it's a memory whose story was passed from culture to culture. Similarly, Earth has its own way of preserving memories like the Great Flood. If a highly developed ancient civilization was indeed wiped out by the floods, then Earth is the source of records. Whether in rock, earth, or primordial seabeds, the planet preserves geological traces. If Earth preserves geological evidence so well, why doesn't it also preserve some from a massive hydrological event like the flood? An event so far-reaching that it reshaped continents for millennia. Surely something lurks waiting to be discovered. But what is it? In Washington state, there's a place that looks like the remains of a planetary war. One glance is enough to see rivers that don't flow, valleys too deep for their streams, and waves as large as tall buildings, all carved into massive rock. This place is called the Channeled Scablands. For decades, geologists racked their brains over one question. How did this bizarre terrain form? This question occupied people for years until one man, J. Harlan Bretz, made a radical proposal. In the 1920s, Bretz suspected the Scablands were shaped by a massive flood, and Bretz didn't mean any random flooding. No. He postulated the flood was so massive that it would have flooded entire landscapes in just a few days. At the time, people laughed at him. It wasn't until 50 years later that satellite images and overwhelming evidence proved him right. But here's the question no one's asking. Were the Scablands shaped by the same great flood we all know? And even more interestingly, what else did the flood destroy? Think about it. This wasn't slow erosion. This was a catastrophe. Imagine water moving at over 60 miles per hour. Walls hundreds of meters high that can wipe out entire cities and all their secrets. Established science calls it the Missoula floods, the result of glacial dam breaks during the last ice age. That happened about 14,000 years ago. But researchers like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson hold a deeper view. They say this event wasn't purely natural. It was a global reset. If the Scablands are evidence of sudden world-changing floods, what else is there? Some historians believe this was just one part of a domino effect that caused similar megafloods to tear through the Black Sea Basin, flood the Gulf of Cambay, and bury Atlantis-like cities under the sea. And perhaps, just perhaps, the real reason the Scablands were ignored for decades wasn't geological pride. It was because the evidence pointed to a version of human history too dangerous to accept. The idea that we weren't the first advanced culture. But first, what evidence is there that there was one before us? After the floods receded, something strange happened. Humanity forgot and a new world began. But some things can't be erased so easily. Scattered across the globe are structures that defy conventional time frames. Megalithic monuments so advanced, they don't fit the civilizations attributed to them. And in some cases, they seem older than history itself. Take Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, for example. Radiocarbon dated to about 11,600 years old. That's 7,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids. But despite the enormous time difference, it features precisely carved stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in complex symbolic circles. This wasn't a primitive farming community. It was a society of engineers, astronomers, and architects. Then there's Puma Punku in Bolivia. Massive stone blocks worked with machine-like precision and fitted together like Lego, but built by people who, according to conventional historiography, didn't even possess the wheel. The mysterious thing about it, many of these sites show signs of sudden abandonment or catastrophic damage. The main suspect is the flood. Upon closer inspection, these anomalies aren't isolated cases. In South America, Egypt, and Southeast Asia, temples, pyramids, and fortresses lie partially buried underground. They're not just buried under sedimented rock, but their lower layers are built with larger, denser, and more advanced masonry. This doesn't correspond to the techniques of the cultures that later reused them. In Egypt, The massive blocks of the Osirian bear no resemblance to the more refined, newer dynastic structures. The same applies to the Jupiter Temple at Baalbek, where trilithon stones weighing over 800 tons lie beneath Roman additions. Did these sites originate from an older, more advanced culture that was wiped out by a flood or catastrophe? Archaeologists try to dismiss this as mere coincidence or skilled engineering with primitive tools. But when the oldest ruins are the most advanced and consistent with the flood's damage patterns, it raises questions. Could these be the ruins of a pre-flood civilization? A civilization with technologies we don't yet fully understand. A society with knowledge in astronomy, sound resonance, and megalithic transport. And if they didn't just build temples but infrastructure, what kind of world did the flood really destroy? This is where it gets interesting. To answer this question, theorists have developed countless possibilities for the ancient civilization that might have existed before the flood. At the top of the list stands Mu, the mother civilization allegedly existing before humans. To this day, scientists and theorists wonder what ended the reign of such an advanced civilization. Some blame a sudden disappearance, but the explanation is inconclusive. How can a developed community be wiped out overnight without a trace? But the big question is, what if they were destroyed by the flood? This brings us to one of history's greatest mysteries, the lost continent of Tartaria or Grand Tartary. Once upon a time, you could open any map from the 16th to 19th centuries and find a vast territory named Tartaria or Grand Tartary. This wasn't a small kingdom. We're talking about an empire that stretched from Eastern Europe all the way across Asia. But suddenly, Grand Tartary disappeared without a trace. What happened to this once great civilization? Did it vanish naturally? Or is there more behind the sudden disappearance? Before we dive into the conspiracy, let's start with the most irrefutable evidence of all, the maps. Take a look at maps from the 16th to 19th centuries. Over 3 centuries, European cartographers showed a huge region named Tartaria, or Grand Tartary. These weren't rough sketches or fantasy maps. One glance is enough to see that the empire dominated large parts of Asia, from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific and from Siberia to Central Asia. Some maps even show independent Tartary, Chinese Tartary, and Russian Tartary. That points not just to one region, but to multiple Tartarian territories. But here's the problem. How can such a vast landmass simply disappear? If you're still wondering whether the empire existed, look at this. Maps from different European countries all show consistent descriptions of Tartarian territories. French maps, Dutch maps, German maps, you name it. They all agree on where Tartary lay and how large it was. You wouldn't expect this consistency if mapmakers were just making up stories. But in the 19th century, Tartary began disappearing from maps. Not gradually, no, but suddenly, as if someone decided that this empire should no longer exist on paper. The question is, how could that happen? Think about it. First, there were hundreds of historical maps documenting this empire over 3 centuries, and then nothing. Modern atlases contain no trace of it. Geography books never mention it. It's as if an entire chapter of world history was ripped from the books. But if Tartaria was just a misunderstood term for scattered nomadic tribes, why go to such trouble to erase it so thoroughly? And more importantly, what happened to all the great cities and territories that were clearly marked on the maps? The answer may be more shocking than you think. At about the time this empire disappeared from maps, something extraordinary was happening throughout America and Europe. Suddenly, imposing buildings appeared everywhere. And we really mean everywhere. Massive structures with elaborate masonry and architectural details that would have challenged modern engineers. Government buildings, train stations, exhibition halls, and even entire city centers. And more. They were erected in record time between the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The big question is, who gave the engineers this advanced knowledge? Before we answer this question, there's a problem. The timeline doesn't fit. In 1906, San Francisco experienced a devastating earthquake. But before anyone could say what happened, within a few years the city had rebuilt itself with breathtaking structures. Given the impact of such a major catastrophe, it should take years to recover from the consequences. But somehow they found the resources and skilled craftsmen to erect buildings that still amaze engineers today. How did they accomplish such a feat? Could it be that they received external help from the Tartarians? If you still have doubts, let's think about the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. The books say this white city, stretching over 600 acres of elaborate neoclassical buildings, was designed and erected in just 2 years. 2 years. Can you believe that? These are uniquely crafted buildings that would normally take skilled craftsmen decades to complete. The official explanation is that they were temporary structures made of plaster and staff, a mixture of plaster, cement, and fibers. But look at the photos. Do these buildings look temporary to you? Of course not. They bear the hallmark of equipped engineers. But here's where it gets really suspicious. Shortly after the exposition ended, these incredible buildings were demolished. Every single one. The government's reasoning: the buildings were only meant as temporary. But think about it. If you invested enormous sums in constructing a building, would you just immediately tear it down again? That makes no sense. Due to this irrational act, Tartarian theorists shook the world with the big question: what if they were trying to eliminate the last evidence of the Tartarian Empire? If you're wondering about the origin of this suspicion, let's look at the theorists' thesis. First, these buildings weren't erected for the exhibition fairs as we're made to believe. No, they already existed. Crazy, right? The thing is, from the 16th to the 19th century, the Tartarians left their mark. Since they were an advanced civilization, the buildings they erected exhibited the same excellence. Tartarian theorists proposed that the government never erected temporary buildings for the fairs. Instead, they renovated the already existing Tartarian structures and subsequently destroyed them. Now let's look at the construction style itself. These buildings, regardless of where they were erected, exhibited remarkably similar design elements. The same classical columns, the same ornate domes, the same precise masonry. Whether you looked at a building in Chicago, San Francisco, or St. Petersburg, Russia, they all looked similar. How do you explain this consistency across different nations, different construction crews, and different time periods? Unless they weren't built by different people at all. Nevertheless, you won't believe the Tartarian theorists' next card. They put forward the astonishing idea that the architectural evidence runs even deeper than the world's fairs. Perhaps the Tartarian Empire didn't simply disappear, but was buried. Taking a walk through any major city built before 1900, you'll notice something strange. Buildings that seem to be sinking into the ground floors that have become basements, windows now at sidewalk level, looking at passers-by like the eyes of buried giants. Tartarian theorists call this the evidence of the Great Mud Flood. What is the Great Mud Flood, you ask? In the 19th century, a catastrophe occurred that swept away many cities. Hundreds of Tartarian cities disappeared beneath layers of mud and debris. According to the Great Mud Flood theory, a massive geological catastrophe occurred that destroyed the highly developed Tartarian civilization, leaving only the upper floors of their buildings visible. But where's the evidence that this tragedy ever happened? Their answer: the evidence is everywhere. In Seattle, entire city blocks show that their original ground floors are buried beneath the modern street level. Seattle's famous underground isn't just a tourist attraction. It's proof that the city was once built at a completely different level. And you know what? This doesn't just exist in Seattle. The New York subway shows the same pattern. Again and again, construction workers uncover such precise handwork deep beneath the modern city. While the government calls them tourist attractions and makes money with these architectural wonders, nobody questions their origin. And most origins point back to Grand Tartary. Remember the San Francisco earthquake we talked about earlier? It's the second piece of evidence. After the 1906 earthquake, reconstruction plans were on the agenda. But during the reconstruction, workers encountered really interesting pieces. Instead of rubble after the natural disaster, they found intact design elements, elaborate facades that had been buried for decades. Since this coincides with the time the Tartarian Empire disappeared, historians wonder if these architectural pieces could have come from Grand Tartary. As a counter-argument, established historians offer a simpler explanation for the Great Mud Flood, which they call urban development. They argue that street level naturally rises over time as new buildings build on old foundations. Streets are paved and repaved, raising the ground level. Buildings are renovated and new entrances created at the current street level. But is that really so? Tartarian researchers naturally argue that this explanation doesn't fully explain their observations, especially since this isn't about a few centimeters or even a few feet of gradual change. Entire floors seem to be buried beneath the modern ground level. What could have been the cause if not the Great Mud Flood? And let's not forget the suspicious timing. Why did this phenomenon occur so consistently around the world, while Tartaria was disappearing from maps? Why did the buried architecture exhibit such remarkable similarity in style and refinement? The mud flood hypothesis suggests it wasn't gradual,